Hi, today we will look at some of the most commonly used verbs in the Spanish spoken in Mexico and a few interesting mnemonics to help you learn them quickly. Do not hesitate to make your own mental associations, just make sure they are unexpected, fun, and preferably multisensorial. All these will make them easier to remember and make sure you have fun while you do it. Let's get started. Let's begin with the verb ser, one of the verbs that equals to be in English. Ser is used to talk about permanent and essential characteristics of something or someone. Let's learn how to use it quickly. Imagine a doctor with a big mustache and flamenco dancing shoes. He's known simply as El Doctor. If you use this nickname, remembering when to use ser will be much easier. Let's see. Doctor. D-O-C-T-O-R. Let's begin with the letter D. D, in this case, would stand for descriptions. Things to describe a person. For example, he is intelligent. We would use the verb ser and we would say, Él es inteligente. Now let's move on to the O. That would stand for occupations. For example, if we wanted to say he is an architect, we would use the verb ser and we would say él es arquitecto. Now let's move on to the C. That would stand for characteristics. That will be to describe something or a characteristic of someone or something. For example, she is pretty. You would say ella es bonita. Now let's move on to the T. That would stand for time or date. For example, if you wanted to say it's 4 o'clock or today is January 3rd. To say it's 4 o'clock, you would say son las 4 de la tarde. And to say today is January 3rd, you would say hoy es el 3 de febrero. Now let's move on to the O. That would stand for origin. If you wanted to say, I am from Mexico, you would say, soy de México. Now let's move on to the R. That would stand for relationship. You would use the verb ser to establish a relationship between two people. For example, if you wanted to say, she is my friend, or she's my girlfriend, you would say, ella es mi amiga, or ella es mi novia. Now let's move on to the verb estar, which means also to be, but it is used in a different way. Estar refers to temporary or non-essential characteristics of something or someone. It helps us to talk about how something is or where something is. For example, I am tired is yo estoy cansado. If you wanted to say I am in Mexico City, you would say yo estoy en la Ciudad de México. In other words, you use estar to talk about how you feel and where you are. A simple way to remember this verb would be to think of how the pronunciation of estar sounds a little like the word star, the ones in the sky. So you just have to think of a star in the sky and how it moves. It doesn't keep a permanent position all the time. It moves constantly. It is not permanent. Just think of the phrase, the sky is full of stars. They move and I feel happy. That will help you remember. I'm going to repeat the phrase. The sky is full of stars. They move and I feel happy. Now let's look at the verb tener. This verb means to have. To learn it, just think you're chopping onions and suddenly you cut your finger. Ouch, it hurts so much. There's blood on the floor. You have to go to the hospital. You have to go there. And when you get there, there are 10 ER doctors to help you. 10 ER looks like tener. So just think, I have to go to the hospital and see the 10 ER doctors. Now let's look at the verb haber. Imagine a smiley 5-year-old kid who walks around with his favorite teddy bear. He comes up to you and says, I have a bear. A bear sounds a little bit like haber. So now just think of that whenever you want to remember this verb. A kid with a teddy bear saying, I have a bear. Now let's use this association to learn an important word, the word I, which can be used to say there is or there are. Think of the same kid with the same teddy bear saying with surprise, "Aye, there is hay in my room. Am I getting a pony?" There is hay, which is spelled H-A-Y, will help you remember that I can be used to say there is. Just remember the phrase. Aye, there is hay in my room. Am I getting a pony? Now let's look at the verb querer, which means to want. To learn this verb, imagine a Care Bear, those little cute bears, saying something like, I want a hug. Care Bear sounds a little like querer, a verb that means to want. Just remember a Care Bear saying, I want a hug. Now let's look at the verb ir, which means to go. Imagine you're in a brand new shiny car. It even smells good. And you are on your way to the IRS. The verb ir in Spanish is spelled IR. And if you're going to the IRS, you can make an association to remember the verb in Spanish. IRS looks a lot like ir minus the S. So just remember, I need to go to the IRS, or I need to go to the IRS. That will make it easier for you to remember the verb in Spanish for to go, which is ir. Now let's look at the verb venir, which means to come. To remember this verb, think about how when someone comes home, he's actually getting closer to you. They are going to be near soon. So just remember the phrase, come home, to be near. Be near sounds like venir. The Spanish verb for to come home, venir, is spelled V-E-N-I-R. Venir. Now let's look at the verb ver, which means to see something with your eyes. To remember the Spanish verb for to see, which is ver, V-E-R, just think of the phrase, I see a bear. Bear sounds a little bit like ver, V-E-R. That will help you remember. Now let's look at the Spanish verb for to say. The verb is decir. It's spelled D-E-C-I-R. Think of the phrase and imagine the phrase, the sir says hello. If you pronounce the sir, like if you were a Russian pirate, decir, it will sound a little bit like decir, the Spanish verb for to say. Decir says hello. That will surely help you remember. Now let's look at the verb for can, or to be able to do something. The verb in Spanish is poder. It's spelled P-O-D-E-R. To remember this verb, imagine the following scene. Only Harry Potter can do it. Potter is spelled similar to the Spanish verb for can, or to be able to. Poder. Harry Potter. It's like poder. So just remember, only Harry Potter can do it. Only Harry Potter can do it. That'll make it easier to remember. Now let's move on to the verb for to speak. Hablar. It's spelled H-A-B-L-A-R. Hablar. Imagine two beautiful young girls sitting in a bar, and they're being bothered by a guy. Then one of the girls says to the other one, when he speaks, all I hear is blah, blah, blah. Blah sounds a little bit like hablar. So next time you need to remember the verb for to speak in Spanish, hablar. Remember these two girls saying, all I hear is blah, blah, blah. Now let's learn the verb to understand in Spanish, which is entender. It is spelled E-N-T-E-N-D-R, entender. Think of a knowledgeable and good-looking bartender who enjoys listening to his customers. Think of the phrase, the bartender really understands me. Bartender sounds a little bit like entender, bartender, entender. So just switch the word bar in bartender for N. Now instead of bartender, it will be entender, which sounds like entender. So the bartender understands me will help you remember that the verb for understand is entender. Now let's learn the verb for to know, which is saber. It's spelled S-A-B-E-R, saber. Imagine you are in a museum. Oh, it's very cold. And you're currently at the historic battles section. Suddenly, you see an antique sword that looks familiar to you, and you say, I know this type of sword. It is a Spanish saber. Saber is spelled the same way as saber, the Spanish verb for to know. So just think of a Spanish saber, a type of sword, and you will remember that the phrase, I know this type of sword, it is a Spanish saber, will help you remember that saber is the verb for to know in Spanish. Okay, let's see what's next. A good verb. To eat. To eat in Spanish, to eat food in Spanish is comer. It is spelled C-O-M-E-R, comer. To remember this verb, just imagine a beautiful mom yelling to her 7-year-old son who is playing outside. She's yelling something like, the food is ready, come to eat. Come inside to eat. Come sounds like comer, and it is written very similarly. Come, C-O-M-E, it looks like comer, C-O-M-E-R. So just think of a mom saying, the food is ready, come to eat, and you will quickly remember the Spanish word for to eat, comer. Now let's look at the Spanish verb for to enter. It is entrar. It's spelled E-N-T-R-A-R, entrar. To remember this Spanish word, just think of the word enter or a sign of do not enter, and you will quickly remember its Spanish equivalent, because it looks very similar to enter, entrar. Now let's move on to the opposite verb. To exit or to go out in Spanish is salir, which is spelled S-A-L-I-R, salir. Imagine you're going through an emergency exit with a sailor who is saving you from a fire. Sailor is similar to salir. So just remember a sailor helping you to find the emergency exit. And you will quickly remember the Spanish word for exit, which is salir. Now let's learn the Spanish verb for to read, as in reading a book. To read in Spanish is leer. It is spelled L-E-E-R, and it is pronounced leer. Imagine you're walking on the street, and you suddenly bump into Bruce Lee, the famous actor of Kung Fu movies. For some reason, he's wearing a pair of huge reading glasses, and he's reading a book about speed reading. The word Lee, spelled L-E-E, is very similar to the Spanish word for to read, leer, spelled L-E-E-R. So Bruce Lee, Bruce Lee, will help you remember the word for to read, leer. Let's move on to a great verb. To rest in Spanish is descansar. It is spelled D-E-S-C-A-N-S-A-R, descansar. Let's find a simple way to remember this verb. Imagine a scene from The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy has been running 4 hours in order to get to her work desk in Kansas. She is tired of running to reach her desk in Kansas, and she needs to rest because she is tired. Desk in Kansas sounds a little bit like the Spanish word for to rest, descansar. Desk in Kansas, descansar. So just remember Dorothy wanting to rest after running to reach her desk in Kansas because she wants to descansar. Let's move on to the final verb, the verb for to learn in Spanish, which is aprender. It is spelled A-P-R-E-N-D-E-R, aprender. Imagine you see Harry Potter, the famous apprentice. Before you can reach him to get your magic wand autographed, a police officer apprehends him for learning illegal black magic tricks. The apprentice has been apprehended for learning black magic. The word apprehended sounds like the Spanish word for to learn, aprender. Apprehended, aprehender. And if you think about it, when you learn, you apprehend knowledge and you lock it inside your head. So aprehender sounds like apprehend, and you apprehend knowledge in your head. That will make it easier for you to remember the Spanish word for learn, aprender. That's it for today. We hope this lesson was useful. If you want to learn more, feel free to visit learningspanishforbeginners.com and tell your friends about us. See you next time. Hasta la próxima.